Emily Reynolds was the kind of person you never forgot. With her warm smile and naturally kind spirit, she had a way of making people feel seen. Whether she was greeting 5-year-olds at the door of her kindergarten classroom or dropping off cookies at her elderly neighbor's porch, Emily made goodness feel effortless. It was a cold March morning when everything changed. She had just let her golden retriever, Max, out into the snowy backyard. The kettle was heating on the stove, and her favorite blue mug was waiting beside a jar of honey. It was a scene that played out every day without fail, but that morning, something fell off. Emily paused, one hand on the kitchen counter. A strange wave of dizziness washed over her. Her vision blurred. Then came the sharp pain in her side, like something inside her had snapped. She never made it to the mug. Max barked furiously from outside as Emily collapsed onto the kitchen floor. She was unconscious by the time the paramedics arrived, alerted by her neighbor who noticed Max whining and pacing at the back door. At the hospital, the tests came quickly. Blood work, scans, specialists filing in and out like a blur. Her parents arrived within hours, terrified and confused. Emily had always been healthy. She barely even caught colds. But now, doctors spoke in hushed voices and used words like critical and advanced. Finally, a diagnosis, a rare autoimmune condition that was attacking her organs at an alarming rate. The doctors were candid. Aggressive treatment could be tried, but the odds were not in her favor. Her body was shutting down too fast. They told the family to prepare. She was moved to a quiet room in intensive care, where wires and machines became her reality. Nurses adjusted monitors. Her mother held her hand, whispering prayers and memories. Her father stood silently, gripping a photo of Emily at her college graduation, blinking back tears. But Max was nowhere near. Hospital rules were clear. No animals allowed, especially not in critical care. But Emily's mother knew her daughter wouldn't want anyone else at her side more than Max. And in a quiet moment, she leaned close to her daughter's still face and whispered, "We'll bring him honey. Just hold on a little longer." Outside, winter winds howled against the windows. Inside, time felt suspended, and hope was growing thin. But something was about to change, and it would begin with 4 paws, a wagging tail, and a love that refused to let go. The hospital room felt like the quietest place in the world. Machines beeped softly in the background, breaking the stillness every few seconds, each sound a reminder that Emily was still here, but barely. Her skin looked pale under the fluorescent lights, and her once bright eyes remained shut. Family and close friends came in quietly, one by one, some whispering messages of love, others just holding her hand in silence. The doctors were compassionate but clear. They had tried everything they could. Emily's body was no longer responding to treatment. If there was anything left to be done, it was simply to make her comfortable. Her mother, Sarah, sat beside her for hours without moving, gently stroking Emily's hand. "She's always been a fighter," she told one of the nurses through tear-filled eyes. Even as a little girl, stubborn as they come, she never gave up on anything. But even fighters get tired, and Emily was slipping further away with each passing hour. It was late in the evening when Sarah leaned toward her daughter again and softly said, "If you want to go, sweetheart, we understand. But if there's a reason to stay, hold on." That's when the thought came. Max. Emily's golden retriever wasn't just a pet, he was part of her. He had been there through every chapter of her adult life. When Emily was going through her roughest breakup, Max had quietly laid his head in her lap and stayed there all night. When she got her first teaching job, he was the one she celebrated with by running around the backyard. She used to joke that Max understood her better than most people did. The idea of her leaving this world without Max by her side didn't feel right. Sarah brought it up quietly to one of the nurses. Would it be, at all possible, just for a short visit? The nurse hesitated. "I'll check," she said gently. It took several phone calls, a hospital administrator, and a sympathetic head nurse to finally say yes. Max could come for 1 hour, as long as he was clean, calm, and didn't leave her side. When Sarah called home, her husband was already in the car with Max, having sensed it might be time. An hour later, the elevator doors opened on the ICU floor. Max stepped out, leash in hand but eyes alert, ears perked. It was as if he already knew where to go. As soon as he caught Emily's scent, he pulled gently but firmly toward her room. And in that moment, without a single word, everything began to shift. The moment Max entered the ICU room, the air seemed to change. Nurses, usually focused and hurried, paused for just a second to take in the sight. A large golden retriever, coat shining, tail gently wagging, walked in with purpose. There was no barking, no hesitation, just a steady, quiet determination in his steps. He knew exactly where he was needed. Sarah knelt beside him and unclipped the leash. "Go ahead, boy," she whispered. "She's waiting for you." Max padded softly across the room, his nails clicking faintly against the floor. He paused at the side of the hospital bed, looking up at the still figure of the woman who had raised him since he was 8 weeks old. Her scent was faint under the smell of antiseptic and machines, but it was enough. He placed his front paws on the edge of the bed and slowly, gently, climbed up, careful not to disturb the wires or tubes. Then he laid his head on her chest, just over her heart, and didn't move. The room fell silent. Emily's chest rose and fell slowly, as it had for the past day. But now, a subtle shift began. The heart monitor, once erratic, started to even out. Nurses exchanged quiet glances, eyebrows raised. It could be nothing, just a coincidence. But one nurse stepped out of the room to check her notes, visibly shaken. Max didn't need science or explanation. He closed his eyes and let out a soft, content sigh, like he always did when he curled up next to her on the couch after a long day. It was instinct, love, loyalty, memory. It didn't matter where they were. To Max, this was just his spot. Sarah sat in a corner of the room, hands over her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She hadn't seen that look of peace on Emily's face in weeks, not since before the collapse, not since the diagnosis. Her breathing was still labored, but something about her body had relaxed, as if she'd finally found something to hold on to. Max didn't budge, not even when the hour they'd been given came and went. Instead, nurses, ones who had seen hundreds of patients and too many goodbyes, quietly agreed to let him stay. "Leave him," one whispered. "Something's happening." Outside, snow began to fall gently against the windows. Inside, a golden retriever laid across his human's chest, steadied as stone, and for the first time in days, Emily's fingers moved. The hours passed, and Max remained by Emily's side. His steady presence was like an anchor, grounding her in a world that felt increasingly unreal. Her family watched from the corner of the room, torn between hope and fear, unsure of what they were witnessing. At first, the changes were subtle. Her breathing deepened ever so slightly. Her mother, Sarah, leaned forward, her eyes scanning Emily's face, looking for any sign that she might be aware. But there was nothing. Not yet. Then something happened that no one could explain. The faintest twitch, so small that it could have been overlooked by anyone who wasn't paying attention, came from Emily's hand. Her fingers, once limp and unresponsive, twitched again, slowly, deliberately. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Max didn't stir. His head was still nestled against her chest, his body pressing lightly against hers. He seemed to understand that something had shifted, something imperceptible, but important. He nuzzled her hand gently, his warm breath brushing against her skin, almost as if urging her to keep going, to keep fighting. Sarah gasped, her hand reaching to Emily's fingers as they twitched once more. "Emily," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Emily, can you hear me?" The monitors, which had been eerily still for hours, beeped slightly louder in response. Emily's eyelids fluttered for the briefest moment before they closed again, but it was enough to spark a flicker of hope. The nurse who had been observing quietly stepped closer, adjusting the IV drip without saying a word. She watched Emily's vital signs, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. There was a small but undeniable change. Her blood pressure, which had been dangerously low for days, had inched up slightly. The heart rate, though still low, was steadier. "There's a shift," the nurse said quietly, stepping back to make notes. She didn't want to speak too loudly, afraid that it might disturb the delicate balance in the room. Sarah's hands trembled as she held onto her daughter's. "Please, Em," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Come back to us. We need you." Max shifted, his nose now resting just below Emily's chin, as if to say, "I'm still here." And for the first time in days, the hospital room felt different. It wasn't filled with the heavy weight of impending loss anymore. It was filled with something fragile, something small and uncertain, but undeniably real. Hope. The impossible seemed a little less so now, and no one knew how to explain it, except, perhaps, for the quiet devotion of a dog who refused to leave his owner's side. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but something had changed within the walls of the hospital room. Emily's condition had stabilized, and the doctors couldn't quite explain why. It wasn't a miraculous recovery. No one was claiming that, but it was a marked improvement, a shift that no one had expected. The best word they could offer was progress. But for Emily's family, the real source of her newfound strength was lying at her side, day and night. Max, as if knowing the urgency of the situation, refused to leave her. He wasn't being disruptive or demanding. He wasn't even barking for attention. He simply remained by Emily's side, his body a constant, reassuring presence. His gentle breathing matched the rhythm of hers. Every day, without fail, Max would walk into the room, tail wagging, eyes full of devotion, and make his way to Emily's bed. He would nudge her hand with his nose, wait for her fingers to curl around his fur, and then curl up at her feet or rest his head gently on her chest. His body was a comforting weight beside her, grounding her in a way that no medicine could. The nurses began to notice something. Whenever Max was with Emily, her heart rate improved, her breathing steadied, and her eyes opened more often. Her family had noticed, too. It was as if the simple act of having Max near her reminded Emily of something worth holding on to. One morning, Sarah watched as Max rested his head on Emily's lap, his brown eyes fixed on her face, his body still and calm. It was a scene she had seen 1,000 times before, when Emily had been well. But this time, there was something different. Emily's lips parted, her eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in days, she managed a weak smile. Max's ears perked up, his tail gave a soft thump, and he leaned closer, as if urging her to keep fighting. "It's like he's keeping her anchored," Sarah said to the nurse who stood nearby, observing quietly. She was slipping away before, but now she's responding to him. To him. The nurse nodded slowly, a look of quiet understanding in her eyes. "Sometimes," she said softly, "it's the bond that heals." It was true. There was no scientific explanation for it. No definitive answer to why Emily was showing these signs of recovery. But one thing was clear. It wasn't just the machines or the medications. It was Max, the love of a dog who refused to let go. 2 weeks had passed since Emily's diagnosis, and in that time, the unimaginable had become reality. Doctors who had once whispered quietly about the severity of her condition were now speaking with a hint of disbelief. Emily, who had been given mere days to live, was still here. More than that, she was improving. Slowly, surely, but undeniably. And while medical science had no explanation for it, Emily's family knew exactly who to thank. Max. Every day, without fail, Max was there. His golden coat, which had once been so sleek and bright, was now a bit more ragged from days of hospital visits. But his eyes, those deep, soulful eyes, remained ever watchful, ever present. He didn't need words to understand that Emily needed him. His devotion was all-consuming, unyielding, and somehow it was working. On one particularly bright morning, the nurse entered the room to find Emily sitting up, a slight but unmistakable spark of life in her eyes. It was the first time in over a week that she had been able to sit without assistance. "Good morning," Emily whispered, her voice hoarse but clear. She glanced down at Max, who was lying at her feet, as if nothing in the world could disrupt his watchful presence. He wagged his tail at the sound of her voice, his eyes filled with quiet pride, as though he knew what they had all been through together. "Emily?" the nurse asked gently, unsure whether she should believe her own eyes. "You're awake, and you're sitting up. How do you feel?" Emily took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling steadily. "Tired, but better," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I don't know how, but I think Max is helping me." She smiled faintly at her loyal companion, who responded by nuzzling her hand. The nurse stepped back, a look of amazement on her face. She made a note in Emily's chart, not sure how to explain the improvement in medical terms. "I think you're right," she said quietly. "There's no doubt that having Max with you has made a difference." Later that day, a specialist came to check on Emily. He was the same doctor who had sat with the family days earlier, his tone grim as he explained the bleak prognosis. Today, his face was softer, less certain. "Emily, we're not out of the woods yet," he began, but his words trailed off as he saw the glint of life in her eyes. "But I'll admit, I'm surprised. Your recovery is unexpected." "It's Max," Emily said softly, her eyes locking on her dog. "He's not leaving my side." The doctor paused, his expression unreadable, then nodded. Perhaps love is the best medicine after all. It was a crisp, clear morning when Emily, with Max by her side, walked out of the hospital. The transition from a patient to someone who could walk on her own 2 feet seemed like a dream. But it wasn't. She was really doing it. 2 weeks earlier, doctors had prepared her family for the worst. And yet here she was, smiling weakly but genuinely, her golden retriever trotting beside her as though they were simply on a casual walk. The doctors and nurses who had cared for Emily stood in the hallway as she slowly made her way toward the exit. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief, others with tears in their eyes. No one could explain what had happened, but they couldn't deny what they were seeing. A woman who had been on the brink of death, now walking out of the hospital under her own power, supported only by her dog and the smallest of steps. Max's tail wagged happily, and though he didn't understand the significance of the moment, he seemed to sense that something was different, something wonderful. He stayed close to Emily, his warm body providing the strength she needed, even if it was just for comfort. The nurse who had first noticed the changes in Emily looked at Sarah, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd see this," she said, her eyes wide. This is incredible." Sarah nodded, wiping away a tear. She couldn't find words. What could she say to explain the miracle unfolding before her eyes? It wasn't just medical treatment. It wasn't just science. It was something beyond what anyone could explain, something intangible that Max had brought back. It was the love between a woman and her dog, a bond so strong that it seemed to defy all odds. As Emily reached the door, she turned to look back at the staff who had cared for her, a soft smile spreading across her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still a little weak. "Thank you for everything." With that, she stepped into the fresh air, Max happily trotting ahead of her as they both left the sterile, humming hospital behind. The world outside was bright, full of possibility. She wasn't sure where the road would lead, but with Max by her side, she knew that anything was possible. The sound of Max's paws tapping against the sidewalk was the most reassuring sound Emily had ever heard. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living again, and it was because of him. Sam's pulse raced as Soldier carefully picked his way through the desert, following the path the mysterious figure had taken. The cracks in the earth still glimmered beneath them, as if the very land was alive and watching. Sam couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that had settled over him. Whoever or whatever that figure was, it was no ordinary desert dweller. The sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the vast desert as Sam and Soldier continued their trek. Every footstep, every shift in the sand felt amplified in the stillness. Sam's mind raced with questions. What had they seen? What was that figure? And why had they been drawn to this specific place? Sam reached for the map in his pocket, though he knew it wouldn't offer much help out here. There were no towns, no landmarks, just the barren landscape stretching for miles. The only thing that had seemed certain was the strange energy surrounding the desert, and now, this shadowy figure. They rode for hours, the desert growing colder as night fell. The stars above them seemed to flicker with unnatural intensity, like distant eyes watching their every move. Soldier, usually so sure-footed, seemed more skittish than usual, his ears swiveling constantly, searching for any sign of movement. Suddenly, Soldier came to an abrupt halt, his body tense. Sam's heart skipped a beat as he leaned forward. The air had shifted. He could feel it. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. Something was here, something watching them. He scanned the horizon, but there was nothing. No figure, no movement, just the dark, empty expanse of desert. Yet Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Then, from the darkness ahead, the ground began to rumble once more. A low, deep vibration, like the earth was quaking. Sam's breath hitched. The cracks, the strange fissures, they were starting to glow, their edges shimmering with an eerie light. "Soldier," Sam whispered, his voice tight with fear. "We need to move." But as he turned to urge Soldier onward, the rumbling intensified. The earth trembled beneath them, and suddenly, the ground beneath Sam's feet split open, sending a jagged crack racing toward them. Without warning, a dark shape shot up from the earth, bursting forth with explosive force. Sam gasped, clutching the reins as Soldier reared back in panic. The shadowy figure was back, but this time, it wasn't alone. From the cracks in the desert floor, shadowy creatures began to emerge, their forms flickering in and out of view. They looked like ghosts, or perhaps wraiths, faint, glowing silhouettes with elongated limbs and hollow, empty eyes. There was no sound as they appeared, only the unsettling sense that the desert was alive with something ancient and untamable. "Get back, Soldier," Sam shouted, his voice trembling. He could feel the terror rising in his chest, but he couldn't let fear control him. He had to protect Soldier. He had to protect himself. Soldier snorted in panic, backing up slowly, his muscles trembling. The creatures moved toward them, circling like predators, their presence suffocating. Sam's mind raced. These weren't just ordinary desert spirits. They were something more. Something far more dangerous. The creatures didn't speak. They didn't need to. Sam could feel their malice, their hunger, a cold force pressing in from all sides. And at the center of it all, standing on the edge of the crack, was the figure, taller now, more imposing. Their face still hidden, their eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. Sam's heart hammered in his chest as the figure raised a hand, and the creatures stopped moving. The desert fell silent once again, as if holding its breath. "We are the guardians of the desert," the figure's voice echoed, deep and hollow. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating in Sam's very bones. "You have awakened us." Sam's mind raced. What are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We are the ancient spirits of the land," the figure replied, "and now that you have disturbed the earth, you will face the consequences." The realization hit Sam like a cold wave. The desert wasn't just shifting because of natural causes, it was reacting to something much older. And Sam and Soldier had unknowingly stumbled upon a force far beyond their control. His eyes darted around. The glowing creatures were closing in, their forms becoming clearer, their hollow eyes locked on Sam and Soldier. Sam swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what was about to happen, but one thing was certain: the battle for the desert was far from over.